This is Dune Talk, a DuneNewsNet.com production. Join us now for the latest Dune news, reactions, and lively discussions.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Dune Talk. So in case you're just joining us, we're continuing our scene-by-scene review of the Dune movie. So last week we got up to around the 50th minute, scene on Giedi Prime, and we're going to continue from there. Yeah, it's just so much as you dig into the movie, so much to analyze. So yeah, looking forward to analyzing today with the full crew. Here today with Garen.
Hey, it's Garen on Twitter at Dune Companion.
Hello everyone, Johnny Sobchak here. You can probably find me on Twitter if you haven't found me already.
Simon here on Twitter and still also as Stouty.
So before we jump into our review, we'll just touch on a small piece of movie news.
Dune movie news.
So one update that we have is that in its third weekend at the domestic box office, Dune has grossed another 7.6 million, and this was just a 50% drop in the third weekend, and that's despite losing the premium screens like IMAX. And in the third weekend, in the eighth weekend overseas, it also hauled 11.1 million. So, and then there we're still seeing strong holds. That was only minus 48%. So we've reached a total of 330 million at the global box office as of past Sunday. So yeah, definitely still continuing to rise in there. Johnny, what are your thoughts at this stage?
Yeah, looks really good. As you mentioned, we did lose the premium format, large format screens for the most part, IMAX and Dolby and those things because of Eternals. The Marvel machine comes right in, less than 2 weeks. So that's fine. And I think that the numbers are good. Again, as you said, the drops have been consistently positive. They haven't been too bad, even with competition, even with losing those screens. So I'll be curious to see what it looks like on this third weekend. Hopefully it maintains that kind of steady decline and it doesn't take a sharper turn. It is worth noting that there aren't any big new movies coming out this week, so that should hopefully benefit it. And Eternals, as we mentioned, that didn't do super well as far as like word of mouth over the last weekend. The reviews, of course, everyone has been talking about it, have not been great for that movie. As you mentioned, kind of creeping up. It's in the 80 million, 83, 85 million range, I believe, domestically. And then also it has the 340 million worldwide at this point. So it's on track. I mean, we still have Australia, of course, at the beginning of December, which is a decent, little market. And HBO Max is going to go away here sooner than later. So that'll be something that could maybe incentivize people to go back to the theater if they still want to see it. So a lot of variables, but hopefully it'll be pretty close to 100 million domestically, which is a solid number. And then also it'll be pretty close to 400 million or so worldwide as its final total, whenever it gets to that, sometime probably in December, beginning of next year. And that's really positive. Again, mentioned it last week, 300 million was the number that we kind of had an idea of reported by the trades before the movie came out in the US as something that people would be happy with involved in the production. So, almost 400 million is certainly more than 300 million. That's a great thing. And of course that buzz will carry through with award season and all these other things. And then the home media release as well. So.
Yeah, and we've mentioned this before, but at this stage, Dune is really cementing itself as the fourth best performing Hollywood film overseas this year. It likely won't reach Godzilla versus Kong, which is really impressive. But of course, Godzilla versus Kong made tons of money in China, which was not the case for Dune. But yeah, looking at this year overall, I think that at least Legendary and Warner Brothers can be happy with the performance of both those movies that they partnered on.
Yeah, I have a quick question about that, Johnny or Marcus. How does this compare, or can we not compare this to prior to the pandemic? Does this have to be kind of a new measurement of the success of a film, or can we base it on films that were released prior to the pandemic?
Of course, there's a new standard because there's different theatrical windows and there's still different COVID situations worldwide. And you have the HBO Max factor, of course, for some of these films. Other, Halloween Kills had its own streaming thing. And then there's, the things with Cruella and some other Disney movies, Jungle Cruise and Mulan in the last year that all had the Disney Plus premiere thing. So yeah, it's hard to kind of judge on that. That's for them to figure out and know, because a lot of them don't even release the numbers for that and what that means financially. But, I think it's still fine to compare it to some pre-pandemic numbers. You just have to keep in mind, it's most impressive, like with Venom 2, for example. That movie made just as much as the first one made prior to the pandemic, years before the pandemic. So that was super impressive. I think that was the biggest surprise and the maybe not biggest success overall, but very impressive domestically and just in general for an opening weekend. Whereas something like Dune, if it came out to 41 million opening weekend before the pandemic, it'd be like, oh, that's not too great. But who knows what it would have been like without HBO Max, without the pandemic. Maybe it would have been 50s or 60s, 70. Now we just have to look at it for what it is and compare it to pandemic times. It's been the best Warner Brothers movie at the box office in many instances and many different metrics since Joker, essentially. Godzilla versus Kong, as Marcus mentioned, made more in China. It's made more, will probably end up making more worldwide overall. But totally, different situation, different IP, different franchise. So this is impressive, I think. But those weekend drops, best since Joker, opening weekend, best since Joker, opening day, all these other things. Best third, I think today it was best, or yesterday it was like best third Tuesday since Joker or something like that for Warner Brothers. So Warner Brothers is certainly happy. I mean, I think they really couldn't have asked for a better situation, and they got their way with the HBO Max deal. So that there was really no negative for them on that side of it.
Yeah, that's also reflecting in the book sale. So of course, it's not surprising to see Dune in the bestseller list, but one of the metrics that I always like to look at, considering my background, is the most read list on Amazon, and Dune has already been topping that for a couple of weeks, and that's actually people who are engaging with it, whether it's like the ebook or the audiobook version. So it's not just people who are buying it and putting it on their shelf. So let's continue with our scene by scene review of the movie. So last time we discussed the last scene in the movie, which takes place on Giddy Prime, and it's quite a weird scene, and we get to see House Harkonnen in situ, and the threat of Baron Harkonnen. So then we return to Arrakis, and we have the strategy meeting. And we've talked about before how Gurney is a really stern presence. Especially we saw that in the training room scene, but he also has a clear sense of humor. So as Paul walks into the room, like Gurney is basically saying, "Oh, there's a hero who grabbed a hunter seeker out of the air with his bare hands." So basically putting Paul on the spot on his first meeting. And we have a lot of interactions. As Leto enters the room, Tuvir Hawat doing his calculations and referring, he's found the Harkonnen accounting book. Garen, I'll start with you. What did you take away from this strategy meeting?
So again, I love the set designs of the Arrakeen city. I love this room. I love little things like the chairs are just like levitating. There's no feet, legs on the chairs. The part of this scene that really strikes me is, and all 4 times that I watched it, it got a little more solemn, was seeing the look on Tuvir Hawat's face, right? Because everyone laughs at Gurney's joke, right, about Paul grabbing the hunter seeker with his bare hands, but you just see Tuvir he doesn't even crack a smile, or he doesn't even blink. He just feels so devastated that it was under his watch that this assassination of the young prince happened. So anyway, that's the thing that really stands out to me. It's the performances of those individuals. But I don't know, this is an interesting interaction. You see Leto being in command. I love Oscar Isaac's performance here. It feels very natural. He's always making some overture to Paul as his son, pat him on the shoulder, or he's trying to get Paul ready for this. I don't know if he knows exactly what's coming, but he's feeling this is the ascension to one day being the Duke. So he's making these little indications to Paul. So Yeah, I think I like all the interactions here and the performances. So
One scene that we criticized a little bit, I know Marcus, you had an issue of it when they were on Caladan still, and they were talking about, hey, Paul, I need you to do this with me before they departed. And I feel like this scene helps build that bridge, kind of little said, hey, I need you. And now we see it happening.
Yeah, it's his first strategy meeting. Yeah.
I really liked it. Yeah, it was just again just a nice little a moment that you maybe wouldn't see in another movie like this, a big budget sci-fi space opera kind of movie where they're just sitting there. It's like I've seen people say that in some elements, like you can feel like maybe the Phantom Menace, for example, because in the Phantom Menace, they're just talking about a lot of times they're in these rooms talking about the politics and the supply chains and you know, blockades and things like that. It's very in that movie, of course, it's very, you know, dry and boring and you don't really care about anything that's going on. And also it looks like crap, to be honest. And so here, though, you have a physical space. It feels, you know, very old and lived in, and the characters have some personality to them, which certainly goes a long way. But yeah, and then I also really like the editing. As far as the editing goes, how this scene ends and directly leads. It doesn't really end. It just kind of runs into them walking out onto the like kind of tarmac where there is the spice silos.
So there's a great little Easter egg. There's 2 Easter eggs in the stuff that we're going to talk about today, especially if you put the subtitles on. Because after I came home watching it the first time in the theater, I was like, you know, I'm going to rewatch it. I'm going to put the subtitles on, see if I miss anything. So when Duncan lands, we know that whole entire scene, my boy, you know, that. But the other part is he goes up to Paul as they're hugging each other, and he's like, I swear you're getting taller. Paul's like, yeah, and you're smelling worse. So there's like a couple Easter eggs there. I wonder if that's just stuff that Denis was like, keep it in post. Yeah, if you guys put the subtitles on, you'll see something like that.
Yeah, I liked what you, Johnny, said about the editing here, because I think in terms of the medium of film, I think they did a good job putting things together. There's one like scene that, you know, I sort of missed, which was, you know, after the meeting in the book where they're on the airfield, like Paul actually falls asleep in the meeting room, and you have like Duke Leto reflecting on, you know, like being a father and caring for Paul. So that's so that's one of the things that I would have liked to see, but I think it made sense how they cut here. And yeah, like you have that smooth transition directly from the scene where you already get an idea of what the situation is, right? Because Tuver House says, you know, we found the accounting book, and you know the Harkonnens were pulling billions out of here every year, but you know that's not going to be us for a while, because we're all this crap equipment that's been left behind and like state of disrepair, etc. And then they go to and inspect the harvester tanks, and there you already understand the urgency. Like basically they have to fill all these tanks every 25 days. And I don't know if Simon, you thought about that, but like I was thinking back to the very original like PC game where you also had that sort of time pressure. You know, yes. you had to like get things done, and you also had to send spice back to the Emperor. So that already like gave the sense of urgency here. And another interesting point here is that when Duncan arrives and, you know, he gives Paul the hug, and then afterwards he comes and reports to Duke Leto, then he talks about that he's been with the Fremen 4 weeks. So again, like here we get to understanding of how much time has passed, because, you know, when Paul first had the conversation in the hangar, it was Duncan is going to leave that day, and then like the rest of the family is going to go in 2 weeks. And here we're already talking like 4 weeks. So like potentially like it's already been a couple of weeks since they arrived in Arrakis, and you know it's been chaos. You know, moving like to a new place and getting settled in new home. So a lot of things going on. So even though we don't get to see like that time passing, it's clear that there has been some amount of time passing. And then of course we have the big introduction of Stilgar, who's arriving. So I'll start with you, Simon. What was your first reaction to seeing that character?
Javier Bardem owns that scene. As soon as he walks in with that cape and the spit, let's talk about it. And just, I love also that Josh Brolin as Gurney's like, I don't like him right away. So if you know what happens later on, you know why that's funny. And it's just Javier Bardem's probably in that scene for what, maybe a minute, if that, but brings such presence that you can tell he is the leader of the Fremens. He is someone that is respected. It's just a great scene. And I wonder if the spitting with Duncan and Leto was improvised, because I feel like Stilgar coming in is so crucial for people that don't know about water and how important water is. When the movie came out, I was talking to one of my friends in France, and he's like, something you're going to notice is water. Water is super important. Going back to last week, Paul touching the water on Caladan, the spit also.
So I don't think that was improvised. You guys correct me, who have the book fresh on your mind. This is taken from the book, the spitting. I don't know if it's in this interaction, though. So I'm wondering if this is Denis kind of combining some elements.
I think it is. Well, that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier, is the scene where they're in the meeting. That is more so in the book. I think they're all in there, and then Stilgar comes in and Duncan, and they do the spitting. Whereas in the movie, they start out in the meeting with all of them, and then they go out, and then they come back in, and then it's not everyone in the same room. It's a different room, and it's just the core characters. I think, I haven't read the book in a few years, but I think that's what it is. But yeah, the spitting thing is, it's great. I mean, it's probably the funniest part of the movie. Like every time I've seen it in the theater, like it gets a good laugh, which is great. And all, speaking of humor, I wanted to backtrack real quick. Two things, but I loved the sight gag of the silos on the tarmac, because when you're walking up, you're like, oh, the Harkonnens have only left us. That's what he says. They haven't left us much. It's just a disaster with the supplies. And they walk up, and you see these silos, like they're just huge, and they're covering the entire back of the frame. And then it pulls out, and there's like all these dozens and dozens of empty, that where silos should be, presumably, and the Harkonnens either destroyed them or took them with them or something. And there's like a few, so I guess they have to either buy some new silos or make new silos. I don't know. That just always makes me laugh, because it just looks so pathetic, and it's such a petty thing. And then, of course, when Duncan hops out, and Simon pointed out the funny back and forth where they're talking about Paul getting taller and Duncan smelling worse. Well, if you've read the book, then you know why he smells so bad is because he probably hasn't bathed, at least maybe properly, like he's used to since he got to Arrakis, essentially. And he's been living in the still suit as well for almost all that time, I would assume. So there's an odor of sorts inside the Sietches, and I just thought that was kind of like a tiny little funny allusion to that. But yeah, I love the spitting thing. Is just, as you guys pointed out, Javier Bardem crushes it. I mean, he is it totally fits what Jason Momoa described. He said this was his favorite part of making the movie, because he's in there with all these other actors that he really admires. And Jason Momoa, I mean, he's not an Academy nominated actor, Academy nominated winning actor like some of these other people in the scene, but he does a really great job with Duncan Idaho, and he certainly holds his own in the room and with the character and the material he's given. But he described, when Javier Bardem comes in, he says he comes walking in like Mick Jagger, like a rock star. Like he does, and he does have like a strut, like the way he's coming across the room, and he's like sticking this Chris knife into his waist, and it's great. And I think it's such a good introduction, and it really leaves you wanting to see more of that character, because, and we all know he's going to be a much bigger character in the second movie, and potentially, what else might happen in different projects. So I really can't wait to see more of that character. Stilgar's huge, and Javier Bardem just adds so much, gravitas to it. I think even more than is in the book potentially, because he just has that personality to him. So it's great. One of my favorite scenes for sure, and because it does stick so closely to what is in the book.
I really like the way Denis allowed Jason Momoa to react to Javier Bardem's spitting in a funny way, because Denis could have directed that to be ultra serious and, you know, like Jason Momoa is being all like, you know, oh no, sir, we're responding to your offering of water, you know, but he allowed him to do it in a funny way. And the more times I've watched it, the more times I laugh at that scene. So, but I agree with all three of you that Javier Bardem, I mean, talk about presence and making me want to know more about these Fremen, and then feeling like the Fremen are powerful. I mean, it's like Stilgar walks in and it's like desert power impersonated, you know, it's just like, it becomes real to me. And anyway, I agree with you guys on those performances.
You know, when Stilgar is making these claims and saying, you know, you're in the wrong here, Paul says, you're right. He says, you know, he basically says, I agree with you. He's not at odds with his father, but he kind of sees both sides of it. And right after he says that, you see from across, Duncan Idaho kind of looks over at Paul, like after he says that, and is kind of like thinking like he, you know, and he just spent all his time with the Fremen. So it's kind of like, oh wow, he just kind of said that almost at odds with his, you know, the Duke. And then of course, you know, as you mentioned, when he walks out and there's that little back and forth between Paul, it's great. And a lot of people, I don't know if people realize this, but Paul doesn't know what they're saying. Like this happens a couple times. And at least to my knowledge, he doesn't understand, you know, they're saying it because they know that he's not going to comprehend what's going on. We're going to talk about it later, but Liet Kynes says something else where it's not exactly clear. It's clear to us that she's picking up on something, but it's not really to the other characters.
One of the overall takeaways of the scene is, of course, this is, you know, as we mentioned, this is a story that's happening, you know, tens of thousands a year of future. But at the same time, this scene is so relatable to today, just in the fact of like two cultures meeting each other, like two very different cultures, and, you know, trying to find that understanding. And you can see that, like, if, you know, you're meeting for someone from a different culture, if you put in the effort and try to find the connection, it is possible. So I think that this scene says a lot. And I don't know that like whether you've had experience of living in multiple different countries or traveling in certain regions, you know, how like there's small like traditions, gestures that you have to pay attention to. And it's I could really resonated with me in the scene about, you know, like both trying to understand, okay, like I want to show that I'm strong, but at the same time I want to show that I'm respecting the other party and meeting them and finding that understanding. So I thought that this was really well done in the scene. Then we have a quick scene where they're talking with the soldiers, and Duncan shows off some of the gadgets that he's gotten from the Fremen. So not only talking about the still sword, but the sand compactor, and they joke about how he's gone native. And he also talks about how he likes the Fremen. They're fierce but loyal. So that's going to be important later on. And then of course we have the scene where, you know, like Duke Leto wants to see the spice harvesting. So that starts where you know, they plan, okay, let's go and see the harvesters, and then they meet Liet Kynes for the first time. So Johnny, I'll start with you. What did you make of the scene where they first meet the Judge of the Change?
Again, another moment in a scene that is very essentially straight out of the book, verbatim, for the most part, at least, where explaining what the still suit is. And again, this is a great example of exposition being fed to us, but in a way that doesn't feel too, you know, unwieldy and gross and like in our face about it. It's just like, okay, yeah, they need to know about these still suits, and this is someone who is very familiar with them. It maybe has helped, you know, manufacture them before and is familiar with the Fremen way of life. And now she is making sure that they fit well, and that this thing does this, so you should know that, and we should know that. And the way the camera kind of works around as she's going from the Duke to Gurney, and then of course there's also kind of that element, really just emphasizing once again that there is a lot of tension and danger in the Atreides house at the moment, because as soon as they walk up and she comes to help them, they're like ready to cut her head off because they're just so on edge about everything. And then, as I mentioned previously, she goes to check Paul, and straight out of the book his still suit is perfectly fitted. It's like he's done it all his life, like he's born to do it. And she has that little moment where it's internal monologue, narration in the book, but in this, it's done so well where it's just like kind of like when you realize something, you just say under your breath, like off to the side, like a throwaway thing. But it's what we know she is thinking. So it just really works well, and it doesn't feel awkward. Like it feels natural. And I thought that was great. And then it just kind of sets the tone. We heard earlier on Thufir thinks that she might be eccentric or something. And you kind of get that. Like there's she's not a bland character. Like there's a little bit of odd personality to her. And I think that comes through in this scene and throughout the rest of her scenes in the movie.
I think this scene is super crucial for many reasons. Like, we get our first real introduction to the still suit, like Johnny was saying. Also, we get her personality instantly. It's not spending like a good 5 minutes with her. We know who she is. She's all business. And she's already seen something with Paul that is special. And like you said, it's like just thinking out loud. She's like, whoa, something's up with this kid. Like, how did he know how to do that? The other Easter egg with the subtitles is right before we see the characters, when you see the people in the, fixing the ornithopter, someone saying, it's already 90 degrees out here. It'll be 140 by 5 o'clock. Let's hurry up, team. Kind of showing the weather.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was super cool. It's something like that. I'm like, those are little touches that are just makes it special. Yeah. And I always forget her name, who plays Leah at the time, but great performance and very like, this is who I am. I'm not here to mess around. I need you to pay attention because this is life or death out here.
Sharon Duncan Brewster, she was really convincing in all her scenes. And going back to that point about both Stilgar and now Liet Kynes, they've made this comment. Basically they're seeing something special in Paul, like, I recognize you, or like you'll know him like because he knows your ways as if he was born to them. And this just shows like that conversation that Paul and Jessica were having like much earlier in the ornithopter about the superstitions and like the bench that are preparing the ways. Like, this is not just something for the common people. This is like all the way at the top of the Fremen society, that they have these strong beliefs. So I thought that was really important to take note of.
There's a scene, you guys, where they're showing, it's like a compass that's been designed, almost like a clock kind of thing. And this scene, at first, I didn't know if this scene was necessary. I kind of thought, is this just filler? I didn't know how I felt about it, but with subsequent viewings of this film, I felt like that was a nice, quick little thing to again show that that Jason Momoa, his Duncan Idaho is all in, right? You've gone native. What Gurney says to him, and I think that's important to establish that again, and then to even just show the sand compactor, which later becomes a device that gets them out of the dune. So. I think I've come to realize that when you're writing a script, sometimes you do have to have these scenes that kind of help you establish just a couple of items, even though, maybe you could have done without it. But now I'm glad that it was in there. And then I just want to underscore what you guys all said about Liet, Sharon Duncan Brewster. I love her performance. I don't know what it is that she's doing with her eyes and her movements and her voice, but it just, I actually used to love the 1984 version of this scene. It's not as grand and it doesn't have a cool ornithopter to the side, but I actually really did like that scene from Lynch's. But Sharon Duncan Brewster just blew it away with this performance. I don't know what it is that she's doing exactly, but she comes across so real and so sincere, but then you can see in her eyes that she's seeing something in Paul. And it's, she does say some words, but it's almost just in the way she moves. And so couldn't be a bigger fan of her in this scene as Liet. So this is a fun scene. And of course, you got the ornithopter just right there. You can see the wings folded and it's just totally cool, but it's a great scene. I love it.
Yeah, real quick, I was going to say, to to both your points, yeah, there's that huge ornithopter there, and then apparently there's dialogue between those characters that you caught on the subtitles. I was just going to mention though, in that scene, like I loved those little touches where they're working on the ornithopter, and there's these other soldiers, and there's soldiers in the background and off to the side, and it's also like this open hangar, so you can see across the entire city. It seems like all those little details makes it feel so much more real, and like it's not just a set they're walking onto, and okay, here's the 5 people in the scene, and then there's a prop ornithopter, and then there's a green screen and all that. The lighting, everything about it just really works.
Yeah, and then we get the scene that we talked about obviously way back in the summer when we saw the IMAX preview of the 2 scenes, which was the spice harvester scene. So they fly out to the desert. We got a lot of understanding about the importance of the spice mining, that the worm always shows up, and we have that whole sequence, which is one of the tense moments of the movie. So let's do a roundtable key takeaways from that scene overall, not going until the scene after that. I'll start with you, Gurney.
Gosh, this is one of my favorite scenes of the whole film. And I think you guys know where I'm going with this, but I'll try and spare you my ornithopter spiel again. But the sound of this scene never ceases to grab my attention. The way the sound is designed in this scene, and granted, I saw it on an IMAX each time, and what I wasn't able to find out is if the IMAX theater I was watching it was the Dolby Atmos sound system. I didn't know, and it didn't advertise that. But the way the space is created with the sound and with, not only the ornithopters, but you're also hearing, with the movement of the worm through the sand, which almost feels like waves on the ocean almost. And just all of the chatter back and forth from Liet talking on, the ornithopter communication lines. And just, there's one scene though, that just always stands out to me. And it's a scene where the camera is right behind Leto, and it pans all the way from the right, and you see one of the spotter aircraft go all the way across his field of vision, and the camera pans all the way across, and then you see the worm coming, and then the camera pans all the way back again, and there's no cut. And so you literally feel like you're on the ornithopter, 100, 200 feet off the ground. And I just love that scene every time because it feels just so real.
Villeneuve, for example, like if he wins the Oscar or something for Best Director, like, which is possible, this will be one of the big scenes. I feel like they're going to look back and be like, that was why he won, because there's so many things happening, and it's all, as you mentioned, so well realized, and it feels so real and tactile. Think about all the moving parts and elements that work in this scene together so fluidly and feel so properly in place. You have this huge CG spice harvester, and then you have them in these, the CG thopters, at least from the outside. And then you're inside the thopter, moving from face to face, and you're in the front of it and you're in the back of it. And and they're filming inside the ornithopter. They're filming like on some hill in Budapest, and they have this like crazy setup, and it's just kind of pivoting around to get the lighting and the colors right. And then they're out in, I guess, either Jordan or the UAE, and they're filming them getting out of the thopter on the ground in the sand. They're running up to the harvester. They have a huge, one of the treads for them to use practically. You have the people climbing out of it. Then, of course, you have the worm, which is just like, what this scene reminds me a lot of? I'm surprised I haven't seen this comparison made yet, but it reminds me of the waves scene from Interstellar, for anyone who's seen that movie. It's just like you're showing up in this alien environment, and you have no idea really what to expect. You have some idea of what to expect, but it really, what ends up happening completely kind of shatters your expectation. And there's just like this ticking clock element, and you're so terrified. Like, of course, you feel at least the main characters are going to get out of this unscathed, but you're still on the edge of your seat because it's just that real. It feels that real. The effects with the sand has been mentioned before, but like again, talking about VFX, this I mean it's a shoo-in to win it. But the sand and the way the sand moves is so unreal. I don't know how they did it. It is like water. It's like waves washing across, and it's so fluid. It's just amazing. And then the editing and the music and Hans Zimmer's score is one of my favorite tracks out of the whole thing. And all this combines within the world of Dune. I mean, it's perfectly true to the world of Dune as far as the designs and the feel and everything. But with regards to the spice and how it's introduced to the story and Paul's powers and his visions and how it's all set up and orchestrated so that, and this is something I mentioned earlier a few weeks ago before Garen got to see it, I think, and I was talking about, I didn't want to spoil it, but you're wondering, so maybe he's having some sort of vision or, he's kind of tripping out, but you don't get to see what is going on. You hear some of it. You get like the Bene Gesserit whispering towards the beginning after it first hits him. But it's not until after the scene where we find out, oh my God, this is what was going on. This is what he was seeing. And it perfectly lines up with all the sight lines and the shots that they had of Paul on the ground in the sand. It all comes together so well. The way the sand rises up and they're sinking into it, and the reveal of the worm again, that's just, it's so, I mean, it's gonna be an iconic moment, an iconic shot for this franchise and just for, I mean, films of this decade, blockbuster filmmaking in the last, however many decades. I mentioned this on Twitter, but it really also reminded me a lot of the T-Rex reveal from Jurassic Park. Very much, I mean, this is probably the most Spielbergian set piece Denis ever done. It's just huge, and the effects and the sound and the music just all comes together perfectly. And
every time I watch it at home, and trust me, I watched it a lot at home. If my girlfriend's in the living room with me watching it and she's on her phone, whatever, she stops and looks at this scene just because of the ornithopters. And every time she's like, those are so cool. So, by the way, I don't know, Garen, if you saw it, if it was on the Dune Reddit or Lego Reddit, but someone made some ornithopters out of Legos. So, Lego, if you're listening, just saying, I know a couple of people on this show that would buy it. What's great also, it explains how crucial timing is for them to get the spice and get out of there before it gets dangerous. Sure, it's the ornithopters also, but it also makes me think a lot of Top Gun. In a way, it is like they're out on their test run, they're on a mission. And this is where I fall in love with the Duke Leto every time, because he is the people's Duke. Like, he doesn't care about the spice. Cool, I saw how it gets collected, but my men are in danger. I need these people safe out of here fast. I mean, we can talk hours of just the visual effects and how beautiful it is. And Garen, I was watching that shot while Johnny was talking. It is super subtle, but it's such an amazing shot. Like, I've never noticed. And this is where Paul starts following the White Rabbit, kind of, where everything starts going a little bit different for a little Paul Atreides. And I'm glad that you didn't spoil that for Garen. The
Thanks,
voices,
John. I appreciate it.
The voices are there. It's also sound design, the editing, the cinematography. One simple thing that I love is the color correction on this. I would be curious to see what it looks like before they color corrected it. We talked about Lux last week, but I feel like this has its own Lux, especially when Paul gets the sand in his face. It looks super grainy, and not in a bad way, but it looks like the film is even a little bit more grainy to feel that spice. It's one of probably the top 10 scenes in the book for me, and also in this version, IMAX, right here. This is why people should have gone to the theater and seen it just for the scale.
Simon, to your point about your girlfriend, yeah, when I saw this, because the most recent time I saw it in theaters, my fifth time, I finally took my girlfriend, who...
Oh, that's sweet of you.
Yeah. But we had read we had read together. I had already read the book once, and we read pretty much up to the point where this movie stops. So she knew what was coming, but she was hopping out of her seat. Like, she was so into it and amazed. And I was so glad to see that, because it really did live up to what you expected. And there's that moment. I mean, I get goosebumps probably every time I watch the sequence at one point or another. But the moment when the worm like breaches through the sand for the first time, and like the sound, like the score like swells, and you can even see the little spotter craft to kind of give it some scale. Like, it's just and then the pressure at that point is really on them to like get the hell out of there. And as the score just revs up through the end of the sequence, when they're trying to run away and they trip and they fall, it's so damn good. It's probably, it might be my favorite scene in the movie. I mean, it has kind of a little bit of everything and kind of really encompasses what I wanted to get out of the movie. And it's so funny because I remember Villeneuve last year, over a year ago, I think during the summer, was talking about how they released an image. The first image we saw, one of the first images we saw after the Vanity Fair piece, was of them on the ramp. And I remember him saying, like, this is one of the scenes that I'm like most proud of already. Like, I think we really got it right. And you can certainly feel that watching it. And I can certainly say that he definitely got it right.
This might be one of the best scenes in cinema I've ever seen. I'm not just saying that because, Dune fanboy here, but just visually, editing, music, performance. It's something I feel like kids should take apart in film school in like the next 20 years.
And one of the most amazing things about this entire sequence, so much happens subconsciously. You could talk about the sequence for like 40 minutes probably. But what I'm getting at is that every single shot, every single moment building up throughout this, from as soon as you see them in the yard being, having maintenance done, and then it gets lifted up into the air, up until the worm shows up and eats it, everything is telling you these harvesters are huge. Like, if nothing else, understand how big these harvesters are. Look at them. Look at the people standing on them. Look at the aircraft that has to pick it up and the way it slowly lifts it up and can barely get it off the ground. Look at it next to these mountains as it's flying by. Look at the ornithopters, how tiny they are by comparison when they come in. And all of that is to say, when this worm shows up and actually eats it, you're just like, holy, like, you understand. There's no doubt about how huge, mind-bogglingly big and powerful and dangerous the worms are. And so to introduce it in that way, which is how they're introduced in the book, really, and nailing that feeling that you're giving the reader or the viewer, that's, I think, it was, again, couldn't have asked for it to be better.
Really stood out was that parallel to earlier on, like when Paul makes that first step on the sand, it's like almost a magical moment, and then he like picks up the sand, and you remember when he was in Caladan and picking up the water, and you really feel that this is the beginning of a journey, and that moment when the spice hits him again, it's like that there's some magic going on, and like as you mentioned earlier, Johnny, about like the editing, I think they made a good choice not to show the visions here, because you're like left wondering, what's going on, and so we're gonna get into that now. So basically, after that scene, which there's so much to talk about, just in that scene, we go back to Arakeen, and on the landing field we have like a couple of like quick moments, but that are important. Basically, Duke Leto is reprimanding his son for taking those risks, and you have Liet Kynes, who she's basically saying how she can't play a role in here. She's an impartial observer, and you really feel that Duke Leto already has a sense of okay, like how drastic the situation currently is, because he knew that they're in trouble, but now he realizes like the depth of the situation that they're in, and it's going to be really difficult to get the spice production on track, and they could have sabotage, they could be a attack. So all these things are racing through his mind, but then we get, of course, to the scene where we have Dr. Yui, he's checking on Paul, and he talks about how spice is a psychoactive chemical, and Paul is sensitive to that. And then Paul reveals that he was having those visions, like not dreams anymore, but actual visions while he was awake. So let me start with you, Garen. What did you think about that dream sequence?
So I just want to harken back to the moment that you mentioned, Marcus, when Paul steps his first foot onto the sand, and there's this, this kind of big booming sound, and then the moment when there's a big sort of gust coming, and it hits him, and all the sound, I'm kind of into the sound, as you can tell, the sound goes quiet, and all you hear is the tinkling of the spice. And I love that moment because then in the moment you're talking about, Marcus, where with Dr. Yui, and he reveals the fact that he was having waking dreams, it reveals to me that that's what was happening in that moment when the spice was hitting him for the first time in a big way. So I love the way they've developed Paul's prescient abilities. It's like, one level of understanding, and then another, and then another, and then another. And I like how that progression happens. So, I like how subtle it is. Again, I know I always do this comparison to Lynch's movie, but Lynch's prescient dream stuff was so in your face. It was just so almost overwhelming to you. And I love how Denis is allowing us to learn and adapt and kind of become more comfortable with this idea that Paul can see the future, and he's learning how to see the future. He's not only always getting it right, but he's learning this skill. So I love that.
Yeah, and then of course you have the moment where you understand, like why Paul is actually kneeling on the ground, because like you have the scene with he's meeting Chani, and then he's kissing her, and then suddenly he's being killed by her, and he's confused, and like he actually felt that it was like such a vivid experience to him that he was like basically kneeled on the ground in a state of shock in a way. So I thought that was really powerful how he saw that. And then one of the vision moments, you see basically the first appearance of the crysknife. You see the crysknife in a sheath, and that's the first of many appearances that we're going to see of that knife. So we're going to see how that becomes important, and it's like a constant in all of these visions. And he's talking about how someone is going to hand him the blade.
What's interesting about watching it maybe 10 times now? Thank you, HBO Max, once again. I'll miss you in a couple of weeks. Johnny and Paul never kiss. There is no lips on lips action whatsoever. It's cut so well that you think in your head canon that they do kiss at one point, but they never do.
Waiting for that vision to come up, because of course it's kind of famously put in the trailers because it really drive home the Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya fans. But like, as soon as they're coming in to kiss, like it pretty much cuts to the opposite side, and you immediately see, oh crap, something just happened. And then of course you look down, you see the knife has been indeed driven into Paul. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting, like fun little choice that it also kind of builds up though this feeling, this foreboding feeling, because now okay, well, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Like, you don't really, if you've never read the book, if you have no idea, you don't know how to interpret that, other than, okay, I guess, she's a Fremen, obviously, but what's the relationship going to be? Is it going to be actually like full-blown antagonistic? Are they going to be like kind of enemies? Or are they going to be something else? They're going to be friends, lovers? What's the dynamic? And so I think that builds up that tension, and I think that's going to be interesting to watch release. You kind of get an idea of what's going to happen at the end of the movie with the way the movie ends, but we haven't really seen them interact in a genuine, physical way. We have things happen towards the end with the crysknife and whatnot, but I think that'll be a big kind of payoff, and at least towards, I would imagine, the beginning of part 2, where that relationship is going to start to be cemented.
Yeah, she doesn't care about him one bit in this movie. She's annoyed by him, and we'll talk more about it when she shows up. But
yeah,
if you listen to her dialogue, she is not a fan.
No.
Yeah, and then the big reveal here was that of course we saw in the vision that the stunning imagery of Lady Jessica, like kneeling, and this is probably one of the ceremonies, potentially the water of life scene, or something, another major ceremony. And then there's the reveal that Paul knows that she's pregnant, and here we have that connection of the timeline. So remember, before they left to Arrakis, Duncan went 2 weeks ahead. And then when Duncan and Paul hug, and then he talks about he's been in the living with Fremen for 4 weeks, and here Jessica's like, she started like, how can you know that? I barely know that. It's only been a couple of weeks. So this likely infers that it was when they arrived on Arrakis, like in that early time, that was the conception, and now as again you understand the abilities of Bene Gesserit, because this is just a few weeks and Jessica already knows, but it's just amazing that she started like, how can Paul know? So it's really amazing reveal, and that imagery of her is just stunning.
People who came out of this movie loving Lady Jessica and Rebecca Ferguson's performance. I think that's probably been the most talked about performance of the movie. And it's so fun to think about the fact that, for people who haven't read the book or aren't familiar with this whole story, I mean, she just gets more badass and more powerful and respected. Like, yeah, you're in for a treat, I think, if you're a fan of that character, because she's going to go in some interesting directions. And as a mother to Paul, as a mother to the soon to be child that she's bearing right now, it's gonna be really interesting. I'm super curious, and I think that was a great. I remember I knew that of course I know she's gonna have a baby because I've read the book, but like I wasn't sure if they were gonna reveal that in this movie. I genuinely didn't. That was one of the few, I guess, true surprises. And so when they showed that, like, it cuts to her inside, and she has the mentat mark on her lip. She has the blue eyes, the eyes of the Abad. So there's a lot of changes she's going through as a person. And then it cuts to that other image, and she has the baby, and I'm just like, holy, like, and then Paul, of course, says, "I know you're pregnant." I gasped the first time I was watching the movie. I gasped out loud, and I was just like, whoa, I'm so I thought it was great. I think that was a great thing to reveal, because now that's going to be in everyone's minds, and everyone's going to be thinking, well, what's that going to be? Is it going to be a boy? Is it going to be a girl? What's the relationship going to be like? How's that going to factor into the story? And of course, it factors into the story in many interesting ways down the line, especially. So I thought it was great. That's one of my other favorite moments that was kind of a surprise and very, very fun as a book reader, especially.
I had the exact same reaction, Johnny. And had this scene where we see her baby, had that not been in there, I think it really would have bothered me, because completely leaving out the fact that Jessica is going to have a child, and having read all the books, that becomes extremely significant, right? And so to just briefly see this cute little baby, and I saw someone on Twitter say they didn't know if that was CGI it looks like a real baby, but the little baby smiles and looks up, and it's kind of an iconic scene. But the fact that the baby's there, and then that's all you get, that she's going to have a baby, then Paul confirms it by telling her. As a book reader, as a fan of the whole series, I was just like, yes, that's awesome, because I know who that is, and I know what that person's going to do. So it's just cool that they included that, even just a brief moment.
And then we journey to the fourth world that we've got to see in this movie, and that's Salusa Secundus, which is the homeworld of the Sardaukar. And if you have read the book or read some of the lore, that that this is also a very harsh planet that has brought forth some of the most feared warriors in Imperium. Starting with you, Simon, what did you take away from the Sardaukar home planet?
I don't want to hang out there. I'm afraid of that planet. Giddy Prime has its own fear, but this is military, Roman 300. Like I said in my review of Blood of the Salusa, the comic, it's insane. It is war. It is hate. It is everything that is dark. And I've heard they actually like had to recut the scene because it was even more graphic. And that weird chanting is so weird and bizarre. I love that the Sardaukars get their own language also, which is the language that we hear in the beginning of the movie, which is interesting. Still not sure why the Sardaukars were it and not like a navigator or something in the long run. And Piter, his eyes just speak volume when he's talking to the general. And the rain is such a total opposite that we've been at for a good 20, 30 minutes of the movie. Dry, humid weather, and now just the rain soaking blood. It's beautiful. I love it, but I don't want to be there. It's great seeing it and seeing where they come from, because you can like say like, hey, they come from this harsh environment. It's like really hard on them growing up and being trained. But seeing that, you're like, whoa, this is like extreme bad unconditional weather. Also, everyone says that the heat is bad, but cold, like on what you see right here, is dangerous. And it makes them for the second best fighters in the Imperium. We'll find out soon enough who the number one fighters are.
So this is one scene, you guys, where I actually think Denis could have given us just a little bit more, because these guys are they're the ultimate death squad of the universe, right? I mean, these guys are trained from birth to just be ruthless killers, be able to survive any environment, no matter how harsh it is. And I get that there was a decision made probably between Joe Walker and Denis to just, we're only going to spend this much time. And there is the conversation between Piter and the Legion leader, but to just show, the people being tortured and their blood's flowing down, and then it's being wiped, on kind of a symbolic ceremony to the warriors. I get that makes them truly sinister and evil, but Salusa Secundus has this whole backstory, and it has kind of this whole mythology around it. And I guess I wanted just a little bit more about this, because then it makes what happens later in the story all that more implausible. So it's a great scene. It's beautifully cut. The imagery is great. I just wanted a little bit more ruthlessness to know that these guys are the ultimate killers, and they're not just stupid, crazy killers. They're skilled, and they're fearless, and so I just wish there would have been a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I thought I'd be curious to hear what you're referring to. You're kind of alluding to something. I think I know what you're talking about. But I loved, one of my favorite things about this, actually heading into the sequence, is that it's like the establishing shot that they do, where it's like the top of like these mountains or hills, and it's like it's like this very quiet moment where it's just you can kind of hear something off in the distance. You're not really sure. And then the letters pop up, and you get the intertitle where it explains what the hell this place is. So clearly they did something right, because they managed to catch in just a short, very tiny amount of time the Emperor's soldiers, what the hell they're, what they can be expected to be like based on their ceremony, based on where they live, where they operate. So I wasn't expecting to see a lot of this. I figured that it would be just this one scene. I didn't know how long it would be. I knew Piter would be there. I knew that they'd be having this kind of exchange, and I thought it was effective. It wasn't, I guess to Garen's point, I could have gone for more length in any scene potentially, just because just show me everything. But I thought that it was effective in getting it kind of in there. Okay, this is what they look like. This is what the hell they're doing. Look at how like dastardly they are with this weird ritual, this blood sacrifice thing that's going on. And then of course Piter, you can tell even Piter is kind of like uncomfortable or kind of off put, and he's like just the most like psychotic killer, torturer in the Imperium. So that's one thing we'll talk about more as we get into the movie, is the Sardaukar, they live up to the billing, I would have to say. I mean, these are not stormtroopers by any stretch of the imagination. And that's a good thing. I think if they had to do something right in that regard, and they did that. And of course, that helps. Seeing how badass and kind of terrifying they are also helps with that distinction between the Harkonnens as warriors, the Atreides as warriors, and then the Fremen as warriors, as well as individual badasses like Duncan Idaho, for example.
Yeah, and that's an important point, because these aren't just like blank like shock troopers with no personality and like only like discipline, but they have this whole warrior religion thing going. Not only are they trained from birth, but they have like this belief in whatever it was. Maybe we'll find out more about that later. But these are like really like they have the skills, and they have like the belief that what they're doing, that they're unstoppable. So it's a really dangerous combination.
One thing I loved about the Sardaukar, what they did, because they could have done any design for the Sardaukar. I think that was one thing a lot of people were looking forward to, fans of the book at least, to see how they were going to depict them. And some concept art came up recently, I think in the last week or so, of different designs for the Sardaukar. And this design is the only one. I really liked some of the other ones. I liked the aesthetic, but this was the only one where you can see their faces inside the suit. I think that is a really important point, because again, especially if we're comparing to stormtroopers, for example, as Imperial soldiers, they are not faceless, non-human things. They're actual human beings in there that have been warped and mangled and mutilated to the point of maybe losing all humanity, but they are functional in that same way as any of the other soldiers they are fighting. And I think that was a really important point. So I'm super glad they went with that design where you can see the face. As much as I love a really badass helmet, Darth Vader or whatever else there is, I thought that was the right way to go. And I think that adds a little bit of extra character to them and distinguishes them a little bit. And as far as the color of their uniforms as well, it's like kind of like a white gray, like it's kind of a muddled white. And of course, seeing their planet, you can understand maybe why it's that color. But I thought that was great too, because the other costume concepts were like red, like a dark red, and then like navy and some other things. And I thought that was great because it distinguishes them pretty well from the other factions, but also the blood and the dirt that accumulates on their uniforms throughout the movie. I thought that adds, again, a little bit of extra texture to them as fighters. I think after a day of fighting, they're just covered in blood and have been killing so many people, and are so, no one can really touch them outside of a handful of people. So I thought, again, that was a really great, I really just liked the aesthetics that they went with for the Sardaukar.
As much as a Star Wars fanboy I am, especially, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I love the prequels. I love clones. I love clone technology. I've always been obsessed with clones. Interesting that Duncan might be one of my favorite characters. But I was like, that scene in Attack of the Clones when we see, the clone army getting ready, I was like, now that looks like crap compared to this. I was like, this is a real army. This is an army of, like we've been saying, not, clones. They actually have a face. They have personalities. If you read The Blood of the Sardaukar and another one shot that's coming out, we're going to find out more about these characters and where they come from. One of my absolute favorite shots, though, of the movie is the pan shot when we see one of the clones, one of the Sardaukars, actually with like the weird kind of bubbly space helmet, just full rain. Just like, I am here, don't F with me, I am ready to fight. I love that shot. That is one of my favorite shots of the movie.
That's one of my favorite shots as well, Simon. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's a perfect shot, but technically speaking, but part of the design as well, going back to how they designed them, their helmets are like, it's animalistic. Like it's like they have they're around their mouth at least. It's like a maw of like an animal or like an insect or a bug. And so it adds, again, it's not just a blank bubble, like it's just nothing but plastic or glass or whatever. It's actual, some sort of respirator probably. And then the way that it's shaped it adds a little extra something, like I was mentioning earlier.
Hey, that's all for this week. So we're going to continue with our scene-by-scene review next week, returning to Arrakis, and of course we're going to have the whole attack and what happens beyond that. So yeah, really excited to break down those upcoming scenes as well with all of you. Let's start with you, Simon. Where can people find you?
You can find me on social at sdowdy, just my first initial, last name. Thank you, everyone that listens, watches. I'm going to read that jerk again. Please like and subscribe. And give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, Johnny Sobchak here. Thank you all for tuning in once again. We are slowly but surely making our way through the movie, and there's a lot to talk about. We've all seen it many times at this point, and you probably have as well. So I'm having a blast digging into it and kind of remembering different things and picking on some of my favorites. So find me on Twitter, and tune in next week.
This is Garen on Twitter at Dune Companion. I love talking to these guys because I always think I go way deep, and they always figure out a way to go deeper than me and see things I didn't see. So I'm loving it.
And this is Marcus Gabriel. Also wanted to thank, I get often people who reach out to me and tell me how they're enjoying what we've done with the website and with the show, and that's of course the hard work from everybody here and some of the other writers as well. So yeah, we really love what we're doing, but it's we always appreciate to hear from all of you. So yeah, looking forward to talking with you all next week.
We hope you've enjoyed Dune Talk. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you know when the next episode drops. Stay tuned to DuneNewsNet.com and add us to your social feeds. Be the first to hear breaking news and reviews.